Ahmed Fabiyi, more popularly known by his nickname Authority, was a student of Tai Solarin University of Education, where he studied history and diplomacy. Among students and lecturers alike, he was a name that sparked both respect and curiosity. Ahmed was said to be the only son of his parents. Though he had sisters, he was the only male child in the family, a role that perhaps shaped part of the seriousness with which he carried himself both on and off campus. Authority had a unique personality that set him apart. People described him as calm and thoughtful, the kind of person who could hold back and observe without speaking, especially when silence was wiser than words. But at the same time, those who knew him well also said he could switch into a completely different mode when the moment demanded it. When things got tense or when confrontation was necessary, he was known to stand his ground boldly and with surprising intensity. He was calm when calmness was needed, and firm when the situation called for strength. This rare balance of traits made him respected, and sometimes even feared, by both friends and rivals. On campus, Authority was more than just a regular student. He was deeply involved in student politics, and his name was often heard in discussions surrounding the student union government. Some sources claim that he once contested for the highest seat in the union, the office of the SUG president. Though there are no official records to confirm if he won or lost, it was widely known that he held the position of a senator within the student union government. In that role, he was active, vocal, and played a key part in student matters, contributing to debates and decisions that affected the entire student body. But politics wasn't the only thing that made Ahmed Fabiyi stand out. He was also known to be closely associated with one of the most talked about student brotherhood groups on campus, the Supreme Air Lord Fraternity. This was a group that had built a reputation over time for being bold, influential, and deeply rooted in many parts of campus life, both officially and unofficially. While the exact year that Authority joined the Air Lord was not clearly stated, most people believed he became a member very early in his university journey, possibly even in his first year. However, other sources shared a different version of the story. According to some, Ahmed did not join the Air Lords in school. Instead, they claimed that he had already been a full member of the Brotherhood before ever gaining admission into Tai Solarin University. This belief was supported by the origin of his nickname. The name Authority, according to these sources, did not come from his school activities or SUG involvement. Rather, it was earned from his earlier life, from his time on the streets, where he was already known as someone who commanded influence and attention. Those who supported this version of the story argued that the kind of respect and presence Authority had on campus was not something that came from school politics or academic performance. They believed it came from experience, from the things he had already seen and survived before stepping foot on campus. His movements, his confidence, the way people greeted him, and the quiet but strong way he carried himself, all pointed to someone who had already lived a life of structure, loyalty, and unspoken codes before ever writing his first university exam. This belief, whether true or not, only added to the mystery around him. To some, he was simply a student with a strong background in activism and politics. To others, he was something more, someone with deep roots and powerful affiliations that stretched far beyond the university gates. One thing was certain, whether as Ahmed Fabiyi or as Authority, his name remained one that left a strong impression on everyone who came across him. Over time, Authority's influence within the campus continued to grow, not just in the political space of the student union government, but also within the inner circle of his brotherhood. Among members of the Supreme Air Lord Fraternity, it was said that Authority held a very high-ranking position. In fact, multiple sources claimed that he was the number 3 man in the hierarchy, which meant he was the third most powerful figure in the group. That level of authority came with both respect and responsibility, and those who knew the structure of such groups understood what that position meant in terms of influence, decision-making power, and access to information. Some people believe that Authority sometimes used his dual power, as a student leader and as a senior figure in the Brotherhood, to push his interests, especially during tense moments in student politics. While there were no confirmed cases with hard evidence, rumors often circulated that he used his connection with the Air Lords to scare or silence those who stood against him in the student union government. People whispered that he sometimes showed up to meetings with a certain kind of boldness, one that made his opponents second-guess whether it was wise to challenge him too hard. At the same time, there were also unverified claims that he occasionally used his political position in the SUG to create setbacks for other brotherhood groups on campus, particularly those considered rivals to the Air Lords. One name that often came up in such discussions was the Black Axe, another student organization that operated in a way similar to the Air Lords but was known to have tense relations with them. Although no open fights or violent clashes were reported between authority and the Black Axe during that period, some students said there were moments when words were exchanged, and tension silently rose to dangerous levels. People close to the matter believed that a silent rivalry was brewing beneath the surface. The confrontations that had occurred were minor, mostly disagreements or indirect challenges, but the tension was there. It was the kind of tension that didn't always show itself openly, but could be felt in the air during certain meetings, campus events, or even casual gatherings. Sometimes, it was in the way people looked at each other across the hall. Other times, it was in the people who showed up somewhere, said nothing, and left, but whose presence changed the mood of the whole place. Authority, despite being involved in campus politics and fraternity life, still moved around confidently. His name had become a campus brand. He was a familiar face, yet one that carried weight. But unknown to him, or maybe known but ignored, he was also being closely observed by people outside his circle. According to some reports, members of the rival Black Axe group had been quietly watching him. They studied his routines, the people he met with, the events he attended, and even the places he liked to relax after classes. Nobody could say exactly why they were so focused on him, but those in the know believed that resentment was building against him within the rival camp. It wasn't clear if that resentment was because of something he had done, something he represented, or simply because of how fast his influence had grown on campus. Some believed it was a mixture of all three. His rise in student politics, combined with his respected status within the Air Lords, made him a symbol of power, and symbols like that often attract opposition, especially in environments where rival groups operate and watch each other carefully. Still, at that point in time, things hadn't gotten out of hand. There were no major incidents, and the school remained relatively calm. But beneath that calm surface, there were signs of tension that only a few could see. And for those who had been on campus long enough, they understood that silence didn't always mean peace. Sometimes, it was just the calm before something bigger. Tension on campus had been rising for some time, but many people didn't realize just how serious things had gotten beneath the surface. For the rival group known as the Black Axe, the situation had reached a breaking point. According to campus whispers and unconfirmed reports, several members of the group had reached the decision that they could no longer tolerate authorities' growing presence and influence. Quiet discussions reportedly took place within their circle, and the final conclusion was that it was time to take action. They wanted to make a statement, not just to authority, but to everyone who watched him rise and assumed he was untouchable. The true motive behind this decision was never officially established, and to this day, it remains a subject of debate among those who lived through that era at Tai Solarin University. Some insiders believe that authority had, at one point, used his power as a senator in the student union government to frustrate or delay certain efforts made by individuals linked to the Black Axe. These claims were not supported by concrete evidence, but they were mentioned often in student discussions and off-the-record conversations. On the other hand, a different version of the story suggested that the attack on authority wasn't personal at all. According to this line of thinking, authority became a target simply because he was a prominent figure in the Supreme Air Lord Fraternity, a group that had long-standing friction with the Black Axe on campuses across the country. If this theory was true, then authority's downfall was less about individual grudges and more about being caught in the middle of a larger, ongoing rivalry between two powerful student factions. Whichever version was closer to the truth, what happened next shook the entire campus to its core. The day in question was supposed to be just like any other. Authority had an examination scheduled for 3 p.m., and being a final-year student with a reputation to protect, he arrived early at the exam hall. Unknown to him, this ordinary academic routine was about to take a drastic and life-changing turn. What made the story even more chilling was the coincidence, or perhaps the cruel irony, that this same day happened to be his birthday. A day that should have been marked by celebration and well-wishes ended up becoming something very different. According to reports from students who were around the scene, about 4 young men entered the exam hall shortly before the exam was due to begin. They did not come in aggressively, nor did they raise any alarm. Instead, they acted like friends, smiling, cheerful, and behaving as though they had come to surprise authority in honor of his special day. Some even said they were holding a small item wrapped like a gift, further adding to the illusion. How these individuals knew it was authority's birthday remains a mystery. Some observers believed it may have been an inside betrayal, that someone close to authority might have leaked the information to the rival group. This suspicion grew stronger because of how perfectly timed and well executed their plans seemed to be. Others argued that authority was such a well-known figure on campus that it wasn't surprising if many people, even those outside his circle, knew basic facts about him, including his birthday. After all, he was a public figure within both the student union government and among the fraternity circles, and it wouldn't have been hard for determined individuals to find such information. In any case, the plan worked, and it worked flawlessly. The four men, still posing as friendly well-wishers, managed to convince authority to step outside the hall with them. Some students said he looked slightly surprised but didn't show any signs of fear. In fact, he appeared calm, maybe even touched by what he thought was a show of love from fellow students. That was the kind of person authority was, confident, trusting of his environment, and used to attention. With no idea of what lay ahead, authority stood up from his seat, nodded to a few classmates, and followed the group out of the hall. What happened next didn't just send shockwaves through the department, it became one of the most talked about incidents in the entire university's history. The calm of the afternoon was shattered moments later, and word began to spread like wildfire. Phones started ringing. People began rushing out of classes. Confusion and fear filled the air. Within minutes, students, lecturers, and even non-teaching staff knew that something serious had happened. Authority, the same person who had walked into the exam hall minutes earlier to take a test and celebrate his birthday, had become the center of a tragic and unforgettable campus event. The moment authority stepped out of the exam hall, still under the impression that he was being led to a surprise birthday gesture, everything seemed normal. But within a few short minutes, the atmosphere changed completely. The four young men who had lured him out, later confirmed to be members of the rival Black Axe group, guided him toward a more isolated part of the school premises. This was an area where there were fewer people around, and where the noise of normal campus activity was far away. It was a spot chosen carefully, likely for the exact reason that they would not be interrupted or quickly discovered. It was there, in that quiet, hidden location, that the calm was suddenly broken. Without any form of argument or warning, the group turned on authority. According to eyewitness accounts and later reports, they launched into a brutal attack with a level of intensity that left no doubt about their intentions. There were no words exchanged. No reasons given. It was not a fight, it was an ambush. Authority, caught off guard, had little chance to defend himself. Various objects were used in the attack, including stones and sharp weapons, and the young man who had once walked boldly across campus as both a student leader and fraternity figure was left helpless under the weight of that violent moment. They showed no mercy. They acted with a kind of cold determination, as if they had already made up their minds that nothing would stop them from finishing what they came to do. Once the attackers felt that he was no longer responsive, that their mission had been completed, they left him there and disappeared from the scene. Some students who later stumbled across the aftermath were horrified by what they saw. Authority was rushed to the school's clinic in a desperate attempt to save his life. Doctors and nurses tried their best, but the damage had been too severe. After some time, Ahmed Fabiyi, the young man everyone knew as Authority, passed away from his injuries. His time on earth had come to a tragic and painful end. The news of his death spread rapidly, first through whispers, then through phone calls, and finally across social media. By the end of that same day, the entire campus had descended into a heavy silence. There was confusion, sorrow, and above all, fear. Students stayed indoors. Classes were cancelled. Lecturers were shaken. Friends of Authority were in tears. The school management quickly stepped in and announced a temporary curfew across the institution. No one was allowed to move freely beyond certain hours. The goal was to calm the tension and avoid further outbreaks of violence. But beneath the quiet, something was boiling. The group Authority belonged to, the Supreme Air Lord Fraternity, was devastated by his loss. Losing someone of his position and influence was not something they were going to overlook. Among themselves, they grieved, and in their grief, many whispered about retaliation. They felt that authorities' death had to be answered. That what was done to him had gone too far to be ignored. Emotions ran high in the days that followed, and the tension that the curfew was supposed to stop only grew thicker. It took about a month, but then came the response. In what was later described as a coordinated move, members of the Airlord group launched a counterattack. Their target was a well-known member of the Black Axe known as Samson, but more popularly called Mosquito. He was not just any member. Some said he had once been the #1 leader of the Black Axe on campus. Others claimed he had served as the group's #3 man, often referred to as the chairman, a powerful position with a lot of influence. Either way, he was a name that commanded attention. According to several accounts, Mosquito was tracked down by a small group of Airlord loyalists. It happened near a bar located not too far from the university campus. That day, he was caught off guard, and he did not survive the incident. Just like authorities' own case, it was a situation that shocked many and added fuel to an already burning fire. Once again, the campus was thrown into fear and uncertainty. Students began to move with caution. Many stayed away from school grounds unless absolutely necessary. Authorities increased security, but by then, the damage had already been done. The cycle of violence had claimed 2 lives, young men who once walked the same classrooms, studied under the same teachers, and shared the same dreams of graduation and a better future. It's a sad and painful reminder of how dangerous and destructive campus cultism can be. To anyone reading or hearing this story, let it be a wake-up call. Say a no to cultism. It has no real benefit. It doesn't lead to peace or progress. It only brings sorrow, regret, and loss. Families lose their sons. Dreams are shattered. A future full of potential can be wiped away in seconds, all because of groups that promote violence and division instead of unity and growth. Choose peace. Choose education. Choose life.